Raghuji, are you in mute? Can you unmute yourself?
Yes, thank you. Thank you there. Namaskar, everyone. Good evening to all our viewers in India, and good morning to everybody in the United States. We welcome you to this workshop on yoga and corporate responsibility with yoga, hosted by American Academy of Yoga and Meditation. This is the last session for week 3 of the series of workshops and webinars as part of the International Yoga Conference, hosted throughout the month of June on occasion of International Yoga Day. For our viewers who are joining us for the first time, I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce you to the American Academy of Yoga and Meditation. American Academy of Yoga and Meditation, AAYM, as it goes by, is a non-profit organization for physicians, researchers, medical professionals, and practitioners of yoga and meditation. The organization is dedicated to education and research in the field of yoga and meditation by fostering the interdisciplinary approach to linking science, arts, ethics, and spiritualism to improve ways of human life. Corporate responsibility in yoga. As we all know, corporate social responsibility, CSR, is an initiative and an aspiration for businesses that can be the tool of positive change to forge a better world for ourselves, our team members, our community, and the future generations. Yoga has become an easy-to-implement solution in the corporate toolbox that provides far-reaching benefits. As organizations focus on improving their employee well-being, employee engagement, hiring practices, and CSR activities, yoga is expected to play a big part in all these initiatives. The eminent speakers in this webinar will present their views and the latest developments in their fields and answer questions from the audience. Moderator's introduction. I'm honored to introduce our moderator for this webinar, Dr. Mahadevan Seetharaman. Dr. Mahadevan Seetharaman is a Duke integrative healthcare leader and involved in promoting Ayurveda and yoga globally through Ayush Living. He is an Ayurvedic health and nutrition consultant, certified as a yoga teacher by Yoga Alliance International. Besides holding a PhD in medicinal chemistry from the University of Minnesota, he has done postdoctoral research at the Cleveland Clinic, Lana Research Foundation. Dr. Mahadevanji serves on the boards of American Academy of Yoga and Meditation, AAYM, American Association of Yoga Physicians, AAAP, and Council of Ayurvedic Research, CAR. Without further ado, I hand over the spotlight to Dr. Mahadevan Seetharaman. Thank you.
Thank you, Raghuji, and thank you to AAYM for setting up this panel discussion. So without much ado, let's get started. Let me introduce the first speaker for today. The first speaker is Sri K.V. Kumarji. K.V. Kumarji is the President and CEO of the Indian American International Chamber of Commerce and Chairman of KMF Investment Group. He sits on the board of many organizations and companies. He was actually the first Indian American appointed by President George W. Bush to serve on the National Advisory Council and the Executive Committee of the U.S. Small Business Administration. He is the only Indian American to serve 6 US presidents from Ronald Reagan and is looking forward to serving President Biden as well. He has also served several governors and members of US Congress, Senate, and mayors. KV Kumarji is the quintessence of volunteerism, community service, and his passion to help the needy, for which he is well known and respected. He has served the community individually and through numerous organizations, and for these efforts, he is the recipient of many prestigious awards, including the Ellis Island Medal of Honor. Let me hand over to Sri KV Kumarji to give his opening remarks.
Most grateful to Dr. Basu Ray, Chairman and the Board of American Academy of Yoga and Meditation, for inviting me to participate in the inaugural yoga conference. I thank the organizers, moderator, distinguished panel, volunteers, and supporters of this major event, as well as the audience. The Academy, in addition to the fusion of science and spirituality, by bringing together leading scientists, physicians, thinkers, philosophers, and practitioners of yoga and meditation, can be a major force to bring the use of yoga and meditation as holistic medicine. The major push in this direction should be to incorporate yoga as an integral part of healthcare system with benefits to everyone, from school kids to seniors. Corporate responsibility is not just in reporting profits on a quarterly basis, but also in developing a productive, motivated workforce, leaders, and most important of all, being socially responsible. In an era of startup ventures, that more and more socially responsible, developing coherent team as workforce is vital. In this direction, the balance of mind, body, and intellect to achieve through practice of yoga regularly has become a pivotal agent of change. When we speak about corporate world, it should also include the government employees as well as at all levels, legislative, federal, and state and city level, city governments. A comprehensive approach will benefit the society around the world. The word yoga today is a very familiar term around the world, and especially in the US. Millions of people practice yoga every day in the country. And this is a testament to enduring benefits man has had from the practice of yoga for over 10,000 years. Compiled and explained by Patanjali in his Yoga Sutras, modern yoga practice has evolved into Iyengar and Ashtanga Vinyasa Yoga, which are very popular and beneficial to overall health. In today's world, especially now with the concern of pandemic taking over everyday life in every corner, societies are faced with changes never faced before. As we get back to a new normalcy in business, family, and social life, it is at most important to keep our balance, both mental and physical. With the new challenges corporate world they have to create a healthy, motivated employees who may not go to workplace where they can congregate and collaborate with others. In this direction, yoga needs to be made part of workday every day by corporations to promote mental health, vitality, and a more happy and productive individual and families. Challenges for a workforce that creates undue stress, creating inefficient and unhappy workforce, long hours, competition, irregular eating habits, multitasking, sedentary desk jobs, bad postures. All these above contribute to more than $70 billion loss every year due to disability and mental illness. Mental illness, depression is a major health expense as well as to corporations. Yoga as a discipline of mind body balance is a sure solution to boost morale and communicate through empathy. The benefit of yoga in workplace, in a corporation, no matter how big or small the corporation may be, challenges are faced by the employees and employers alike are complex and get stressful for everyone, especially these days when we are experiencing delays, backlogs, and even not enough manpower to challenge of having to make both ends meet. A good routine of regular practice of yoga to keep person in balance and more centered approach is essential. Benefits of yoga workplace, which is a home office for many during this pandemic, alleviates physical discomfort like back pain, neck and shoulder pain due to sitting too long hours, and active yoga practice postures can help this alleviate that. Fatigue due to sitting in front of your computer by improving circulation and relaxation postures. A better focused mind and clarity of thought by pranayama and meditation. Team spirit, motivation, and morale improves when individuals are, empathetic and workforce from regular practice. Ultimately, at all of the above benefits are the bottom line of your business. To develop a corporate yoga program, factors keep in mind: have a good assessment of employee interest, an experienced yoga instructor to teach at all levels and age groups, sessions personalized to have assessments of improvements, adapting classes during workdays based on needs and determined routine. For corporations, whether large or small, a simple way to begin introducing yoga to work is with AAYM, who can help identify the needs and tailor the program to suit its criterion. AAYM can play a very important role in bringing the various yoga institutions, instructors, and methods to the corporate world by bringing them together to optimize the available resources. This strategic partnership can benefit one and all. As I mentioned earlier, evolving the legislative body to recognize yoga as an essential need and incorporating it at all levels is extraordinarily beneficial. A push for funding to incorporate and make it part of healthcare system needs effort by AAYM involving all experts to put forth a plan and an agenda to move forward. AAYM will be ready to do such tasks. There are several integral treatment centers and yoga centers around the US and the world, and all this should be brought together to have a better world for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, KV Kumarji. Let me introduce our next panelist for his introductory remarks. The next panelist is Dr. Radhakrishnan Pillai. He's the director of SPM Foundation and Chanakya Institute of Public Leadership, University of Mumbai. Dr. Pillai studied the ancient text Kautilya's Arthashastra at Chinmaya International Foundation, Kerala, under the guidance of Dr. Gangadharan Nair. He's educated in the field of management and consultancy and later proceeded to do his MA in Sanskrit and obtained a doctorate degree in Arthashastra. He spreads the knowledge of Chanakya's relevance to business management to millions of people across the globe through his lectures, workshops, training programs, radio shows, and articles. He is the recipient of the Sardar Patel International Award in 2009 and author of the popular book Corporate Chanakya. Now I request Dr. Radhakrishnan Pillai to give his opening remarks.
Namaskar. It's an honor to be on the AAYM platform on this wonderful International Yoga Day celebrations, and where we are looking at the relevance of yoga as a concept which is not just ancient but also eternal. Yes, friends, it's an honor to represent one of the greatest sciences that this human race has discovered, and over generations try to understand its relevance. Many of us know about it, that there is a science, an art, and a knack to yoga. And we have seen yoga from these various speakers on the panel and all the esteemed scholars, academicians, thinkers, practitioners, teachers of yoga from across the globe, that yoga has got multiple dimensions and multiple relevance. Friends, right from asanas, which is very popular now because of the health benefits, it starts at the physical level. Then it moves on right up to the spiritual level, where person gets enlightened, or what we call as samadhi. So from what is a basic asana level to the samadhi, everything has been covered. And Patanjali Yoga Sutras defines the process in detail. But somewhere I would be talking about a very different dimension of yoga, which probably is very, very important, but not quite popular on the mainstream. What is it? So before I talk about it, my own understanding and most of the understanding that I discussed with scholars and thinkers of yoga have said yoga can be beneficial at 4 levels, the 4 basic personalities of a human being: physical, mental, intellectual, and of course spiritual. So we find yoga being beneficial at all the 4 levels. Physical level, no doubt, we are seeing a lot of research papers coming out across the globe. All the countries are practicing what we call as asana. Yes, yoga asanas. So physical benefits have been seen in a mainstream. So the awareness is being created. We already have seen that second aspect of yoga, that is the mindfulness part of it. The mind is something which is being controlled through yoga practices. So we see yoga being helpful in tackling a lot of mental health challenges, and yes, anxiety, depression, and various other elements that is been coming in the forefront has been tackled through yoga. The next one is intellectual level. Probably that is the one I'm going to be speaking about. Yes, that is something that we need to discuss a little bit in detail. And the final one is the spiritual part of it, which is samadhi, and ultimately what we call as nirvana, moksha, enlightenment. So in these 4 levels of yoga, I'll be focusing on the third aspect, which we call as the intellectual yoga. Friends, this word of yoga being used, or I would say being the wisdom being taken to the highest level at the intellectual level, is being mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita, where Lord Shri Krishna talks about Buddhi Yoga. Yes, of course, the whole 18 chapters of Bhagavad Gita is yoga only, right from Arjuna Vishada Yoga onwards to Karma Yoga, Sankhya Yoga, a lot of them. But one of the mentions that comes in is Buddhi Yoga. And that is where I started realizing that we need to give the intellectual rigor to yoga also. So what does it mean? Many of us are moving into what we call as the knowledge economy. Yes, what is the knowledge economy? The knowledge economy is where most of us would be moving on into the space of intellectual working. Peter Drucker, one of the management gurus, put it very nicely, and that is many, many years ago, decades ago, I would say. He said the future would be of knowledge workers. And today we see that, whether it is the IT revolution that has happened, if you look at the consulting field, if you look at the think tanks that has been, created across the globe, the foreign policies, international relationships, all these giants who are working in corporations and government policies and strategy, they're all working at the very, very high intellectual level. Yes, friends, yoga can help us to become intellectually smart as well. Physically fit, mentally alert, intellectually brilliant, and spiritually evolved. So this concept of Buddhi Yoga comes in Bhagavad Gita, as I mentioned, and all scholars of Bhagavad Gita have done a lot of debates about it. I will not go into the Bhagavad Gita because that's not my subject of specialization, but I would talk about one of the greatest strategists this world has created, that is Chanakya. Chanakya lived in the 4th century BC, which is roughly 2,400 years ago from today. And he was a strategist who built India in a very different level, at the intellectual level, and made India during those days what we called as, Vishwa Guru. I'm not here getting into the power politics of Chanakya. That's not the area. But what he trained everybody was in something called as intellectual yoga. One may wonder, is it true that there is an intellectual level of yoga of Chanakya's teachings? I would go to the extent of even telling, not only in Chanakya's teachings, but he calls it as the Prathama Vidya required for a leader. So the first subject that you learn if you want to be in the leadership level or decision-making level is what we call at the intellectual level. And this is a subject he mastered. It is called as Anvikshiki. Yes, if you open the Kautilya's Arthashastra, which is a magna opus consisting 6,000 sutras on leadership and governance, he actually speaks about how a great leader should be trained. What is Anvikshiki? In Sanskrit, if I were to describe, it says, Sankhya Yoga Lokayata iti Anvikshiki. So there are 3 things that come together and make what we call as Anvikshiki. Anvikshiki is the science of strategic thinking. And there's a combination of Sankhya. Everybody knows about Sankhya Yoga by Kapila Muni, and we have the Sankhya Yoga as a chapter in Bhagavad Gita. So I'm not going to be talking about it, but if you want to be a thinker, you need to understand Sankhya. That's one of the interpretations. So good at numbers, calculations. Leaders have to be very good at numbers. Everything is about data analytics today. But the second he talks about is yoga. Yes, Chanakya brings in yoga, Sankhya Yoga and Lokayata. Lokayata means being worldly wise, being practical, being result oriented. Again, it's a philosophy by itself. When you look at the 6 darshanas, 6 plus 3 major 9 darshanas or philosophies of India, all these 3 comes in. So Chanakya is telling us that if you want to be a strategist, a decision maker, a successful leader, and a successful leader, a strategist works at the intellectual level, then you should master Anvikshiki. And Anvikshiki, as I rightly mentioned, it talks about the intellectual level of yoga as well. Yes, friends, I've been doing a lot of research and I've been thinking about how do we create good leaders. And the very clear thing is that good leaders are good decision makers. I will not be having much time to speak about the subject of Anvikshiki. There are a lot of books that I've written on it, so that is a separate discussion altogether. But let us look at from a concept level to an application level, and specifically in the corporate world. Friends, I've been very fortunate that I've been involved in the International Day of Yoga celebrations right from the beginning. And one of the first conferences that we organized by the government of India, it was in New York, the first academic conference, I would say, with the Consulate General in New York and our government of India, ICCR, and all those things. At that particular time, I realized that we need to bring in yoga at this particular level, but do we have an application or is it just conceptual? And I'm very proud to tell you that I've been working with hundreds of companies, corporations in India and abroad, and more than 20-25 countries where the team leaders, the project leaders of various companies are actually being trained in the intellectual yoga or Buddhi Yoga part of it. I will just talk about one case study, one example. And that is this company. I've been highly involved in the yoga part of it for quite some years. And that company is the world's #1 company originating from India in the field of IT. You guessed it right, TCS, Tata Consulting Services, one of the most respected companies. It has got 4.5 lakh employees, which is close to 500,000 full-time employees. Yeah, that's not a small number. And we have been thinking how to introduce yoga right from the asana level to the buddhi and the spiritual level. So think about it, that we are seeing the benefits of how all these knowledge workers in TCS are getting stuck in decision making. and decision making is a process by itself. But if you are having the process of the yoga methods of decision making, then you actually become an enlightened leader. I just want to stop here by mentioning something that Chanakya mentioned. He doesn't just talk about leader, but he talks about the ideal leader as Raja Rishi. So that's the word that he uses, not just Raja, but Raja Rishi. So think about this. Two words coming together, compounding, Raja plus Rishi. So our concept of leaders are an enlightened leader, Raja plus Rishi, what is called in the Western world as a philosopher king, the philosopher leader. So if we bring in the philosophy of yoga into leadership thinking, into decision-making thinking, believe me, that person brings in a lot of different dimensions. The company culture of productivity, result-oriented, and yes, they are very practical as well. So friends, I just want to open out by telling that, let us not miss out on this very important dimension of yoga, which is called as the Buddhi Yoga. And of course, Chanakya spoke about this in detail in his subject called Anvikshiki, mentioned in the Kautilya's Arthashastra. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. There's so much work to do for all of us in this particular space as well. So I would thank all the organizers once again. I'd like to hand over to our moderator, Mahadevan ji, for giving me this opportunity to speak on this particular platform. Thank you to all the organizers, especially Indranil Basure ji and everybody else. Namaskar. This is Dr. Radhakrishnan Pillai.
Thank you, Dr. Pillai. Let me move on to introduce our last panelist for today, Professor Ashish Pandey. So Dr. Ashish Pandey is Associate Professor at Shailesh J. Mehta School of Management in Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay. He has completed the Fellow Program in Management from Management Development Institute, Gurgaon, India in 2007. And his research interests are in broadly three areas: mindfulness and yoga and its relevance in the field of management, spirituality at workplace and business and society interface, and best practices in management and organizational development. And he has published several papers in these areas and in the areas of mindfulness, yoga, spirituality, management, and organizational development. Dr. Pandey regularly engages with corporates and institutions for organizational and leadership development activities. Now, let's hear the initial presentation from Professor Ashish Pandey.
So, namaste. As we are going to discuss about the yoga and corporate responsibility, I would like to share a few things about organizations. About 10 years ago, we tried to understand organization as manifestations of the collective consciousness, or rather a form of collective consciousness. So we proposed that organizations, like individuals, also live at the different levels of consciousness. So there can be market consciousness, social consciousness, and spiritual consciousness. That's how we thought we can understand the organizational level consciousness. And the spiritual consciousness, or at the different levels of consciousness, organizations follow ethics, moral, of its own kind. So for example, at the market consciousness, organization will follow mostly utilitarian ethics. In the social consciousness, they will follow the discursive ethics, and in the spiritual consciousness level, they will follow ethics of care. Similarly, moral reasoning, nature of excellence, what is the kind of leadership being promoted, all these things vary from the level of organizational consciousness. Yoga can help in raising the organizational consciousness. And in last 10 years, we were able to conduct some experiments to demonstrate empirically how yoga can help increasing the level of organizational consciousness, or those aspects of consciousness which have major implication at the organizational functioning. To understand the organizational consciousness from the CSR perspective, there is one another work with our scholar Ms. Nidhi Bhatta. We try to present an idea about corporate spiritual responsibility. And the major proposition, the central proposition was that corporates not only having social responsibilities, but they have spiritual responsibility, because this is a different kind of CSR, and that is essential because most of the people, a large number of people, spend major portion of their work waking hours in the organizations. So organizations are the sites where people find their work. People search for meaning and purpose, sense of community, belongingness, their overall understanding and their comprehension about their place in the larger schema of things actually arises from their work. So organizations have to be spiritually responsible as well, because that faculty in us which search for meaning and purpose in the larger schema is a reflection of the spirituality. We need to understand that corporate social responsibility is something which captures the stakeholder transactions and fairness, whereas corporate spiritual responsibility is about organization being the sites where individual life flourishes and realizes its full potential, which includes spiritual aspect, which includes spirituality. In the recent years, this model about the humanistic management has been able to capture this idea, and not only has captured this idea, but also has tried to given the processes and systems based on which organizations can fulfill the corporate spiritual responsibility. It is special and it is alternate to the existing thinking about economic models and existing thinking which has been predominant in the management theories and economics theory, which are utilitarian ethics based. The perspective of the human being is more like a utility optimizer, or agency theory which talks about the maximization behavior of the human being, which requires a constant supervision. What humanistic model suggests that human beings have the drive. They don't have the wants, they have drive. Want is what is based, want is the basis on which most of the economic thinking is being built. Whereas the drive are more fundamental aspect of human personality, which it has acquired in the process of evolution. So want is more like a manufactured concept, whereas drive is more a natural way of understanding, better way of understanding the human nature. What it says that human being have certain drives. So a drive for acquisition, that is being reflected with the acronym A. Drive to defend the territory. Acquisition is having the enough food, enough clothing. Having the territory means their sense of security about their boundary, about their social boundaries, about their sense of security. So these two things are very well captured in the agency theory and the utility optimizer, utility-based theories of economics and management. But human beings also have another drives, that is the drive for bonding. That drive for bonding is the basis of formation of the community, and before that, formation of the family. Then there is also a drive for comprehension, the drive to comprehend our place in the larger scheme of things. And these drives actually are independent of each other, and they are being acquired by a human being in the process of evolution. Management need to look at the protection of the threshold dignity level by satisfying all four drives. And second important thing is that humanistic model talks about, it points out a very important condition which says that human beings do not exceed, they do not maximize the utility. They actually balance the utilities. They balance their different tribes. And that is very similar to what our scripture talk about dharma, arth, kam, and moksha, all being equally important objectives or purusharthas of human life. And that leads to well-being. Yoga can contribute to well-being based on this understanding. And that has been our basis of experimentation in last few years. So how yoga can help in enhancing the organizational consciousness and can help to enhance the well-being in the way it is understood in the humanistic school, not in the limited way which is understood and explained in the utility optimizer view or in the agency theory. So I'll talk about 3 empirical studies very briefly. All these 3 studies are based on survey-based testing, theoretically derived model about positive psychological mechanism, which are about the different aspect of the humanness, about well-being, about moral reasoning, etc. And all these studies, all these modeling is followed by real-time experimentation design, which included control group and experiment group. So first study was about moral reasoning. We all apply some moral reasoning to make certain decisions. So moral reasoning happens to be, moral reasoning operates at 3 levels: pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional. Pre-conventional means seeking benefit and avoiding harm. Conventional means following group norms or following the law of the land. Post-conventional is choosing our action based on the logic of the fundamental values like truth, beauty, and goodness, and having a universal perspective wherein we look at any action of ours from the lens of one test, and that test is universal applicability test. That means if everybody start doing same thing in this situation, will the world be a better place? So we try to understand whether the practice of mind, whether the practice of yoga and mindfulness is one of the manifestations of the yoga practice. Can that help in enhancing the moral reasoning? We found that it enhances the moral reasoning very significantly. So this was a 6-7 week experiment, and that happens by increasing compassion and by decreasing egocentric bias. And this aspect is extremely important for the corporate world because it is the moral reasoning which decides the policies of the organization, which decides the nature of the association, that decides the nature of the relationship as organization conceives with society. So moral reasoning is important. Decision making, it has an importance in making the policy decisions. Second aspect was related to well-being. Altruistic behavior, which is reflected in our tendency to be helpful towards others, is another very important aspect of CSR. If managers do not have altruistic orientation, do not have helping behavior, they can always hide behind utilitarian logic, they can always hide behind fulfilling the legal requirement and may not reach out to the larger section of the societies to help out. So we set up an experiment after testing this model, and this model says that YBP, yoga-based practices, contributes to positive psychology, and psychological capital is the perhaps most popular construct of positive psychology. We in this paper try to understand what connects yoga-based practices and positive psychology, and we found that there are 2 things which connect these connect yoga-based practices with positive psychology. One is self-transcendence, my ability to go beyond myself, my ability to see beyond me and myself, and to be able to see things in the larger scheme of things. And subjective vitality, means my feeling of energy. Most of us practice yoga in this audience, and we can connect it at the experiential level, that subjective vitality, our sense of energy increases, and our ability to oversee our own behavior and transcending from the limited frame of mind, limited frame of our ego, that these are the natural result of following yoga based practices. That results into building the psychological capital, and psychological capital is represented with the acronym HERO, and that's why the title of the slide is Can Yoga Make Hero? Because HERO is an acronym for hope, efficacy, optimism, and resilience, and that in turn builds altruistic behavior. Interestingly, in the same study, we found that it is not only helpful to build a helpfulness, not only it enhances the altruistic behavior as assessed by the peers, as assessed by the colleagues in the class, but it also helps in securing better grades. So it enhances the academic performance as well. So this is not a zero-sum game. You can do well materialistically as well and become more helpful if the yoga practice is being followed in a community, in the group. Third study I wish to share about the cognitive ability, energy, and multitasking preference and engagement. So that's a complex dynamics. It's a process which we observed in our classrooms, that as semester progresses, the engagement of the students keep falling down. And that is true for the workplace as well. When employee joins our organization, their energy levels are high, but with certain things happening around, or their engagement with multiple things, multiple responsibilities, that engagement level starts coming down. We hypothesize that can yoga based practices prevent this decrease in the engagement levels. And one more thing we observed, that this engagement, primarily in our setting where this study was carried out, happens because of the multitasking behavior. So students indulge into a lot of tasks at the same time, and then that actually result into dissipation of the energy. We found that yoga prevents this tendency to multitask. So students actually complete, those who practice, they complete one task in hand and then move to the next task. That helps them to be more effective. That helps them to, that actually prevents the dissipation of the energy. So this is the most recent published work. Based on these things, we can say that how yoga, if followed in the corporate setting, in the corporate life, it can help people to be more responsible, people to be more joyful, people to be more engaged, people to be more helpful. And that can help organizations to be more responsible. And that responsibility is not only social responsibility, that responsibility is a spiritual responsibility. We need to look at this field as a very emerging field, and well-being till now in the yoga research and the conversation about yoga was focused at the individual level. With these studies, we can see that yoga can be understood at the organizational level and organizational well-being. Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, these are all part of the Chitta Prasad as mentioned in the Patanjali Yoga Sutra. Chitta Prasad is the natural outcome of the yoga practices, and that has natural impact on the policies and procedures and the organization culture being created in any organization. So these are some of the very promising areas where yoga should be understood as a major contributing factor for organizations to demonstrate more CSR, where S not only stands for social, but also stands for spiritual. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Pandey. So I think we have a lot of questions coming in. I will just invite all the panelists on screen and we'll start taking some of these questions. Let me start with a question for KV Kumarji. Can you talk about the International Day of Yoga in the White House and also the adoption of yoga within the government and administration in the US within the public sector?
Gladly. First of all, we started the first Diwali function in the White House. And like that, we need to do the same thing with yoga, because Diwali function was a symbolic function, whereas yoga is a real thing to perform. And I will be happy to take it up with the administration at the right time. In fact, our Chamber of Commerce is organizing a White House briefing for our 30th anniversary next year. And maybe AAYM can be part of that, and some of you, the eminent speakers like all of you, can come over and speak at the event.
Sure. Thank you, sir. See, along the same lines, they are asking, can we make yoga compulsory in all public sector undertakings in India? The Department of Ayush, which promotes yoga, is the ministry. Can the ministry actually work towards making it compulsory in all the PSUs? Dr. Pillai, you want to answer that?
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. It's already happening in a big way. In fact, I just saw a tweet coming in from Indian Oil saying that please participate in the International Yoga Day tomorrow. So that shows that the interest is already there. And with the Department of Ayush and all the PSUs coming together, it will have a major impact, not only on the employees of these PSUs, but also the supply chain, the vendors, and so many other customers of these PSUs. Yes, very much in the happening.
Okay. And along the same lines, let me ask Professor Pandey. See, most of the people working in corporates actually right now prefer gyms to actually yoga. And how can we incentivize people for taking up yoga, or how can organizations support that? And also, on a connected note, can there be an influence on health insurance if somebody is a yoga practitioner or has taken up yoga as part of some corporate initiative?
There are studies which have compared the impact of exercise and yoga, and they have differentiated the impact. So exercise is a beneficial thing. Gymming is certainly beneficial on certain aspect, on certain biomarkers. But when we compare the impact of the both on the wide range of biomarkers, there is a much uniform impact of yoga practice on the large number of biomarkers. So these are like documented studies. We can certainly forward the references of that. GARD, and there are 2-3 systematic studies. Even one being led by a physician in the Harvard Medical School. Professor Khalsa is one of the authors in that study. Another impact is the impact at the spiritual and emotional level. There are no studies which are showing the impact of the exercise on, say, psychological capital, because there is no logical reasoning to believe that will impact the self-transcendence. So these are the things which operate at different level. They are operating at the level of energy. They are operating at the yoga operates at the level of emotions. And that results into a lot of positive psychological outcomes. So self-transcendence, self-regulation, subjective vitality, self-control. These are things which are kind of added, which we cannot expect, or at least not found to be enhanced by the simple exercises. So that's the additional kind of impact. And how to motivate people for that. The resistance for trying out contemplative practice like yoga and mindfulness is coming down. World is recognizing that. What I have found in my personal engagement with the corporates is that even if you make people practice couple of times, maybe even once, in a systematic way, some experience comes, and that experience stays with them. I remember some processes, simple processes, teaching to my students 15, 18, 20 years ago. And they did it, sometimes they didn't enjoy, but then when they were meeting after 10 years, after so many years, many of them say that, okay, you made us to do this. That time we did it because you were making us to do that, but now I'm regularly following it. So the impact of yoga and the intervention of the yoga is more organic, holistic. Uh, uh, Shuddha Atmiya Prem. This is, I don't know the English word for that. So yoga can be spread with the Shuddha Sattvic Atmiyata, Shuddha Sattvic Prem. That is the way yoga has sustained till now, and it will go on with this Shuddha Sattvic Prem only.
Mhm. Thank you. Shri KV Kumarji, you want to add anything to this?
Yeah, I think it's both Dr. Pillai and they're very good explanation. But I just want to add one small point. Just like in the olden days, there was no benefits of having alarm system, but now the insurance companies give you discount. Just like that, in addition to gym, meditation and yoga together, if we can medically tell the corporations how to achieve that one, it should become like a part of the insurance program. The insurance companies will give more benefits if you practice yoga and meditation. Thank you.
And Dr. Pillai, you worked with TCS, you said, on these initiatives. Can you tell a little bit about the program and what was implemented there?
Yeah. So there is a initiative within TCS called as TCS Care. So it is basically caring among the employees, a major project under their HR division. And what they have been doing organically over the last 4-5 years, they said, let us try to introduce a lot of wellness programs. And slowly you can see wellness includes yoga in a major way now. And what they did is they started with a small experiment. And it so happened that this experiment was found very successfully among the employees. And, as Dr. Ashish does, it is very scientifically, they have documented it and they come out and saying that there is benefits to it. Now, the good part is that in TCS, they have taken it up at the management level where they are saying that now, since it is scientifically proven, we can see it from two dimensions. One is the health and the second is the care dimension. And very soon they are having a panel of experts coming in and having a budgetary approvals at a major level where they'll be teaching at the leadership level. So they say among the TCS there are 5,000 employees and 4.5 employees overall. But they're saying that can we actually get a panel with a funded budget to say that it has to be a practice across the top to the bottom. So that's the initiative. It is called TCS Care.
Nice. So essentially, there has to be a change, and Dr. Pandey talked about the humanistic approach of management, and also at the leadership level. In fact, these days, this Vasudhaiva Kudumbakam is emerging as a new leadership philosophy where you consider the organization as a family. And what can be done at the leadership level in terms of their orientation towards yoga and CSR? So, Dr. Pandey, you want to add something in that aspect in terms of what can be done at the leadership level, because that is what percolates within organizations, right?
That's so. I think that whenever this impact happens at the leadership level, my experience suggests that they are the most appreciative about it, because this is something which they can implement. This is something which they can. They are more sensitive because because at the leadership you see that your small act, your one act can influence, can have influence at multiple levels. So there is a natural recognition that I need to have control on my mind. I need to have the calmness in my heart, and that has direct impact on the impact I create in my organization. Basically, the job of the leader, major role of a leader to create the climate and create the culture, and that's where the work happens. Leaders cannot go in each workstation and can get things done. They need to create the ambience, and which is the psychological ambience. The yoga make them realize that it is not only psychological ambience, it's a spiritual ambience, it's a consciousness. and once that experience happens, they are the first to recognize it. And I think that's the right place to start the intervention, because once they experience it, they can make their team members, they make their organization also to go through this process. I have had the experience of very closely studying the impact of yoga-based practices on a port which was suffering from major industrial unrest, and there was a difficult time. People were on strikes. They damaged the property of the company. All that happened, but after that, what organization decided was to have the yoga-based intervention, and we went there after 4 months of the intervention. The workplace was totally changed. The supervisors were saying, generally the HRs find supervisors not promoting their people to go for, not leaving people to go for the training. Whereas in this organization, supervisor was asking the trainers and asking the HR to please take my people for the program. Art of Living Foundation, they introduced the solution Kriya, and they did that intervention. So yes, the leadership is the place where we must communicate and try to have more and more intervention that will naturally percolate down to the different other levels of organization.
Okay, and Dr. Pillai, you want to add something to that? Maybe something from what Chanakya has to say in terms of being a leader and how yoga can influence that?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, Chanakya would call, as I spoke also, a Raj Rishi. Now, as you grow higher and higher in your leadership position, you're using more of your brain. And today, with a lot of cognitive science happening around, there's a lot of work happening at the intellectual level at leaders. Now, think about it. There are two ways of leadership. One is, organically you grow into an organization and become a leader. But the other is you actually train the individuals at the leadership level right in the beginning. So if you look at one system, for example, we have in India called the IPS or the IAS. They're young boys and girls that get into the public civil services. But from day one, they're trained as leaders. Now think about it. It is not an organic growth. It's right from the beginning. They said, the early 20s, they're trained to think like leaders. They may not have the experience. But they're trained to be leaders. So along with yoga, what Chanakya suggests is that let them also be mentored in leadership. So what we have this concept of, leadership mentoring is also considered as a part of leadership training. Chanakya calls it as Vriddha Sanyogaha. So when you yourself are not able to keep your mind calm, then you have a mentor who tells you. In the same way, even in yoga, one of the things, we see both Kivi Kumarji, Ashish Pandey sir telling us about the various organizations that are applying it. But what is very important is also, even while practicing yoga, let us have a mentor, a teacher who will correct us. Otherwise, you can go off track. So drawing the parallels, Chanakya believe for leadership, you require a mentor. And for practicing yoga also in the right spirit, you require a mentor. That's the right leadership training. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And Sri KV Kumarji, in fact, in the US, almost 15% of Americans have practiced yoga in the last 6 months, right? And you were also involved in some MOUs between the US Small Business Administration and Government of India. So what do you think in terms of formal yoga-based initiatives and support that SBA can give right now in terms of promoting yoga in the workplaces?
I think there are a lot of funds available for the right causes, especially at a time like this. And I have sent some information to Dr. Basure, and what one can do is to apply for some of these funds that are available, which helps mentally and physically, as Dr. Pandey and Dr. all of you have said. what we can do is to approach for Dr. Basore to write a letter to the SBA administrator and request her how AAYM can help directly, and also other organizations can also approach. The only factor is that you have to be a US based organization helping the US community to get this funding.
Okay. Yeah, actually, there are a lot of comments coming in about different organizations and their names where they have yoga sessions and yoga training videos and so on. So it seems to be a lot more popular. So let me quickly switch topics. I think we are past the time, but I will maybe go one more round of questions in terms of hiring practices within corporates. How can you actually hire people who are more aligned with the principles of yoga and so on? Would that is that something that can be done, or what are your thoughts?
Well, it's first of all, as both the gentlemen said, one of the things that that we need to do is to start training people at the top, so that it trickles down to the HR department and they ask all these questions, pertinent questions, to bring in the right people on board. But more importantly, we need to educate them. AAYM should take the lead in bring other organizations together jointly and bringing the great academicians and the industry people together and have a good seminar in Washington or in New Delhi or both, and bring them together and make it work for the betterment of everyone. That's the first step that we should take.
Dr. Pandey, anything on corporate hiring in yoga?
I think that that can be handled like most of the corporates now, at least in India, a large number of corporates who rely on the new recruits, particularly in the software industry. They have close connection, close interaction with the institutions. And if the communication happens, and if we are able to, if the corporates are recognizing the importance of yoga, the best thing is they communicate to the institutions from where they do the hiring in the very large numbers. So that's a very first thing. That is also the right place to engage young minds for this practice, and that my hypothesis is, and this question has given me another research idea, that people, the students, if they are trained in yoga, they are more likely to stay with the organization for the longer time, because they will be having more reflective mind. They can have more better calculation about why they are successful or why they are not successful. So that will give them the stability. Man sthirta is the first thing, one of the foremost things of the yoga practice. So I think if the corporates are interested in hiring, at the time of hiring, means there will be some legal requirements, and under that you can't really ask people whether do you do yoga or not. But that can be done only informally. But if they are hiring from the campuses, that can be very easily introduced, and then that will have an impact on the stability. Because we are for last few weeks we are doing program with the CIOs, Chief Information Officers. And one of the foremost challenges, almost everybody is talking, that these youngsters do not stay. And they leave the organization for without any apparent reason. One person said that this one guy, very bright guy, doing very well, actually left because his girlfriend had some poor opinion about this company. So these are the examples coming from the business leaders. They are the industry leaders. So that is the situation about the instability of mind. If they do something at the recruitment at the institution level, I hope there will be some impact, and attrition will suddenly can be addressed in some, at least to some percentage.
Actually, you're right. You're talking about hiring, but I think the attrition is very high. So the employee engagement, retention, and attrition, if you can actually take care of that, then your pressure on hiring actually goes down.
Yeah.
Yes, Dr. Pillai, you want to add something to that?
I would definitely agree with Ashish ji, because it's all about leadership trickling down from the top. And Bhagavad Gita says this very nicely. Yad yad acharati shreshtaha tad tad deve taro janaha sayat pramanam kurute lokas tad anuvartate. So it's about role modeling. So if the leader himself or herself is practicing yoga, it's easy to get budgets. It's easy to get policies done. But if you just leave it to the HR department and say, there is some process we have to take care. So I would say, let us all the leaders be yogis, and those who come to the organization will also become yogis. So I think it's very important. Yeah, so it's very important to actually have a top-down approach and a down-top approach, and in between are the policies. As somebody said, let the Ayush department come with some policies. So I think it's an ecosystem, as Kumarji said. It's not just about one person, but it's about the ecosystem. So right from the campus recruitment to the leader practicing. So I think somewhere over a period of a time, it becomes a habit that we are all practicing yoga in some way or the other. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So let me switch gears. So Prime Minister Modi, a few years back, said that the private sector must contribute towards development of yoga and Ayurveda by contributing a part of their CSR funds towards yoga and Ayurveda related activities. And right now, the CSR money is going towards a lot of vocational programs, into schools, into maybe developing gardens and things like that. What are your thoughts on CSR funds being used to develop yoga within the country? Who wants to go first? Dr. Pandey?
My take is that this research on some cutting edge aspects of yoga certainly requires resources. And these things are actually well connected with the corporate benefits as well. So if we are able to put up our case well about support of the organizations, about the studies of the yoga, there is a hope, and I'm seeing that corporates are forthcoming in supporting the research, because it eventually helps them as well in their work as well. But the more important thing in spreading yoga is actually practicing an informal influence, Shuddha Sattvic Prem. And if that happens, people will start influencing, and they are seeing the impact. Seeing the impact can not come by allocation of the resources. We should be having more and more people practicing it, and that eventually that inspires others to take up. That is my take about the corporates, CSR funds. So CSR funds are important to support the research in yoga. It is important, but we don't require too much fund about the organizing of the yoga practice sessions. Corporates, wherever in the corporates the yoga intervention was successful. Dr. Pillai is closely working with TCS, so he must have seen the leaders over there who are promoting yoga. The business leaders are actually, they are promoting because they have had experience. Some of them, some of the leaders, the data center head who is the heading of this initiative, is actually also pursuing MSc in yoga. So it is not the fund allocation, but their practice and their role modeling, that is helping in spreading the yoga within the organization.
Very good take actually. I like that. What about you, Dr. Pillai? What do you say?
Yeah, I think again we are all on the same page as Ashishji said. See, if there is a will, the resources will get created. And when you boil it down, you realize that resources are not a major constraint. Especially in yoga, what do you really require? A mat and a room? So it is not setting like a plant and machinery where it's a heavy capital investment. And let me tell you, the maximum that you require is time commitment from organizations.
That's it.
So That's it. So I think everything else is secondary, and people would come down and say, okay, I will sponsor the, the nashta, and that also will be very sattvic. So you don't have to spend too much on that, not too much of masala. So I think the simplest thing about yoga is not even resources, it's the will and the push.
Mhm.
And as Ashishji rightly mentioned, once you feel the benefit, then you are a fish in the water. And I always personally believe that, resources will be created. I'll tell you the other side of it. If you first look at resources to be created, you actually become very bureaucratic in nature.
Mm.
And then, as we say, pillar to post, and the file is still lying in the HR department, is still lying with the CFO, then that's all gone. So I think everything else will get created. I think it's about just having the will, and what you require is just a yoga mat, just get it from home.
Okay. Shri KV Kumarji, you want to add anything on this topic of CSR?
Well, I agree with Dr. Pillai and Dr. Pandey. What they have said is perfect, but I don't know much about the CSR funding. But I tell you though, time is money for the corporations.
Yeah.
And that amount of money, instead of them doing something else, they will be doing yoga. And that commitment has to be there. And as you rightly said, when it trickles down from the top. Now, in the past, Indian embassy here in our consulates never did yoga in the embassy. Now, after Prime Minister Modi ji started that one, okay, everybody is hosting yoga day. In fact, today I was invited by the Indian embassy for in International Yoga Day, and I had to respectfully decline because I'm here with you, and it is spreading. But even there, the ambassador has to set his time and the staff has to set their time, okay, and then the resources are required, but not to the extent that we really need outside, because they have to get a place, they have to provide certain things, like water and other things. In India it may be different, but here everything is cost effective, and so it costs some money, but not a big deal of money. As you rightly said, it's a very minuscule. You need a mat, you need something, and I appreciate what India is doing for the yoga and meditation, and I think people like Dr. Pillai and Dr. Pandey is a great asset to the world. Thank you.
You are very kind, Kumarji. You are very
Thank
appreciative.
you. I think you're right at the hour. And, I think the benefits of yoga, I think everybody knows on the corporate, like your productivity gain, and, you can reduce the stress and, helps achieve work-life balance and so on. So any closing thoughts from you before we close the session? What about, we'll start with Dr. Pandey again.
Till now, yoga was considered to be medium to enhance the individual consciousness. We must recognize that yoga has great role to play, and it's a great instrument to enhance the organizational consciousness and social consciousness. As we recognize it, more and more leaders will start practicing it. We will start we being more sensitive about it, and we will be seeing different kind of organizations and different kind of society.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Dr. Pillai?
Yeah, I would say let's have 2 P's as actionables. Practice it and preach it. Okay, it's very, very important. Before we actually talk about yoga, let's stretch ourselves. Let's get into the asana meditation part of it. But our Indian culture also talks about prachar. Don't keep the knowledge with yourself, So it's very important to put on the marketing cap and say that, let's spread it. I think that's where probably we have the International Yoga Day formally also. Informally, it was there for many centuries. So I think let's all become yogi in practice and yogis who are pracharaks of yoga. Thank you.
Exactly. And you're all practicing and preaching here. Shri KV Kumarji, your thoughts?
Thank you very much. And I think well said by both Dr. Pillai and Dr. Pandey. And I fully agree with them. And let's preach and practice. Or practice and preach.
Practice and preach, yes.
Yes.
Thank you. So essentially, we're saying that we are all change makers in the world, and we take action in our lives, and we can make a positive difference by practicing first and then preaching and then promoting yoga globally. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for the amazing conversation. And let me close by saying, let us all make yoga an integral part of our day-to-day lives, in our families, in our organizations and corporates. And wishing everybody a happy International Day of Yoga. Namaste.
Mahadevan ji, you've been a wonderful host. Thank you so much for coordinating this.
Thank you, Mahadevan ji.
Thank you. I really
Absolutely.
enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Thank you for
Thank you.
such a wonderful session. So, thank you for Dr. Mahadevan ji for moderating such an impactful conversation. Thank you, Sri K.V. Kumar ji, for covering the value of bringing policies that could help incorporating yoga in corporate activities, among other things. Dr. Radhakrishnan Pillai ji for bringing up the discussion of Gnana Yoga as well as intellectual or Buddhi Yoga and various elements of Chanukya Niti from his doctoral degree in Artha Shastra. And Dr. Ashish Pandey ji on efforts of engaging corporates in yoga applications in CSR, a redefinition of CSR to be a corporate spiritual responsibility for positive psychology of organizations and business leadership, as well as interfacing the society through mindfulness and moral reasoning. Thanks to the moderator and all the speakers once again for enlightening us with precious information in this session. We hope to see you all again in our studios. As for our viewers, we thank you for attending the webinar. I know it's getting late and hope you all enjoyed it. For more information on these informative webinars and workshops that are being hosted throughout the month of June, please visit our website, www.aayonline.org/yogacon-USA/. For next week's sessions and more up-to-date information on the last week of this conference coming up next week. Thank you and have a good day and good night wherever you are. Thank you very much.